for joining us, Karen, our very first guest on our new Netball Unlocked podcast. I'm sure you've got plenty going on, but Chloe and I just wanted to say thanks very much. It's been a busy week for you.
It certainly has. And thanks for having me. It's an honour to be your first guest. It's quite exciting, really, isn't it? New podcast. And I think reading between the lines of what you guys are about, definitely going to be an interesting one. So excited to be on.
Thanks. Well, listen, thanks for joining us. Chloe, go on. Anything from you?
Karen, I mean, where to begin? I think we'd love to know what the latest is, what the state of play is with injury. You've been absolutely, decimated, effectively, like 40% of your squad out. Can you let us know how things are going for you right now?
Yeah, we've been pretty ravaged. It's been an off season, that's for sure. It's been a tough one, and you know they always say like you've got to love your job, right? And I do 95% of the time, but it's definitely been a tough run into the season. So we obviously found out about Nat's pregnancy back in September, October time. Obviously super excited for her when she announced her pregnancy and her first child. So can't wait to meet baby Metcalf. But that obviously left our first hole in the squad. And we kind of really looked at how do we go about replacing Nat? What does that look like? And I was pretty adamant that we would take our time in making those decisions because, you know, ultimately Nat's a huge gap that you need to fill. So in some ways, us kind of holding back and waiting to replace Nat worked in our favour with everything that's gone on since. So, you know, we're having to play our cards pretty well. And then obviously we lost Nicola when she was playing for South Africa in the first test against Jamaica in January. So she had a fracture through her radius, a wrist joint, and as well as a detached tendon in her thumb. So not a nice injury for Nick. And then obviously Lois pulled up in training with an injury there. So she's subsequently had surgery. She has a scan on Monday, which is her 8-week mark from her surgery. And we're hoping to know more about her return once she's had that midpoint scan as to if there's a chance that she will be back during the season or not. Obviously, we've all got fingers crossed for her that we will get her back at some point, but that halfway point on Monday is critical for us as to knowing where she's at. We're hoping to get Nicola back some kind of mid-April kind of time, so maybe around 4 or 5, fingers crossed. She's making some real progress. She's absolutely hating on me and Laura and Gabs in training because she's getting a lot of attention from us one-on-one, so but she's going to be firing, ready to go once she's back on court. And then unfortunately last week we got the news that we needed to pull back on Paige Reed. She actually sustained a stress issue in her foot in the Nations Cup back when she was obviously representing England and got her first cap, which was super exciting for her. So yeah, we've just been kind of managing that over the last few weeks, but scan results showed that we just needed to pull back on her. So fully deloading Paige at this moment in time. And as it is a stress response, no real timeline on when she'll be back, but we're hoping it won't be too long.
Have you known anything like this? You've been in the game a long time, player and coach. It seems fairly unprecedented to me, certainly in netball terms.
I've never had to deal with it as such. We have had difficult seasons. You know, we look back at 2022 and people will probably ignore 2022 because we went on unbeaten and won the league. So they probably go, well, you didn't have that many problems. But our defence end for pretty much most of that season was decimated, and we actually had to turn a goal shooter into a goal defence in that season to kind of get through it. So we've definitely faced challenges before, and you know we've got a great culture at Manchester Thunder that everyone rallies behind and makes sure we kind of do what we need to do to get through the season. But I think it's even more difficult now. We're playing off 10 players. I don't think you can ignore that fact that we don't have training partners and we've got a flat 10. So even training with 10 players is tough because your players are not getting any rest. You know, like if you're doing half court, whereas previously you had a squad of 15 in at training, if you were doing half court, a couple of people would always get that rest and you could always afford to load manage people through training and stuff like that. Whereas now you're playing off 10, no one's getting a rest. Like you're in training, you're in every combo, you're in everything that you're doing. So it becomes more high risk to those athletes that any niggles and stuff like that become harder to manage. And if we do pull back, then that upsets our training. So it's a, first year in NSL2 going down to 10. And I think we're definitely finding we're getting every challenge thrown at us, which is character building, some might say.
I was going to say, Karen, because you pointed to the 10, which was part of this professionalisation process. And then the second half of that really is this pulling up from next gen. But there's an enormous sense, like 4 international players. There's not that quality in next gen as much as everyone would wish that there was. How, what do you make of those rules? Because I imagine no one probably thought that this would ever happen. And now you're providing the greatest stress test of the rules ever.
Well, I know NSL2 are constantly saying, we're monitoring all situations and we'll assess it at the end of the season. I'm like, well, we're throwing every possibility at you. So assess that and go with it however you please. So, yeah, I mean, it's definitely a difficult one. And I think you strike on the next gen, and is the quality there yet? I don't think it is. That next gen league is going to be brilliant and definitely critical in the way we move our sport forward, absolutely. But as you mentioned, like, we've lost 4 international athletes, Lois and Nat and Paige, all Roses internationals, and Nicola Aspar Protea. No one can replace that quality from within the next gen. It's just impossible. So for me, we talk about our league wanting to be the best league in the world and wanting to be challenging SSN, but whilst the restrictions around the regulations are as they are, we're never going to get there, unfortunately, and that kills me to say, because I love our sport. I love Manchester Thunder. I love our league, but I find that the regs are a little bit strangling, and don't get me wrong, England Netball have been working, and NSL2 have been working really nicely with us to try and look where we can get some special dispensation. You only need to look at the fact we were able to bring an A Retief in, and we really appreciate that flex and support. But I do think the regs are a little bit strangling. If we want our league to be the best in the world, then there's going to have to be another look at what those regulations are, and whether, I know they don't want to go all out into allowing as many internationals as possible because they're concerned around the impact that will have on the Roses, which I fully appreciate. But in my eyes, I'm like, surely 3 imports wouldn't be too many if you had 1 in each area of the court, so you're still getting that development around them. But yeah, I mean, it's tough. The next gen, we had to make decisions on our injury replacements before the next gen season had even started. So you hadn't even been able to get eyes on those players and see what those players were capable of doing. So for us to make decisions on who were we pulling up and when, we were holding off on that till next gen started so we could get eyes on people. And then obviously you lose Nicola and Lois. It's like, I don't even know if my defenders are ready to step up and replace a Nicola Smith. You just can't make that decision at that point. So, yeah, it's a tough one, and there's still, I do think the quality is lacking. There's probably a couple of players dotted around next gen that could step up into Super League and be ready, but there's also a lot of players, especially not 4 in one club, that can do that.
And 3 at one end of the court. Sorry, 3 at one end of the court as well is kind of a big thing as well, Karen. It's like you're not just dealing with someone everywhere. You're dealing with like a fairly significant drop off in one end of the court. So I think, to play devil's advocate a little bit, how would you like to see a squad look, if that makes sense? We're right at the dawn of this new era, if you like, and I think 10 always felt like it would kind of be a bit of a pinch point. Where do you see squads maybe in a year, 2 years, 3 years down the line? What would you like to see them look like?
I mean, for me, I would like more imports. I think if we can go 1 in each area of the court, that would be great. And I think it would definitely add some, a sense of spice to the league and different styles of what that could be, what could offer, and definitely give Rose's players an opportunity to play against different styles week in, week out. We're seeing how well that works, in the SSN, the Australian shooters and other shooters are getting to play against some of the best defenders in the league week in, week out that they wouldn't be allowed to do, if their regulations were so tight. But I think the piece around training partners is critical. and being able to have players in your training environment to just bolster numbers and to have some quality in and around that. You look at how SSN are operating, and I'm not saying we need to go and copy SSN, but it seems to be that a lot of what we are doing is copying SSN. So if we're looking that closely to them, then why not have a look at what else are they doing? They've clearly faced some real issues with 10 players over the last few years. A lot of teams have been massively struck. They've now introduced that 11th player rule, so they can name that 11th player and bring them in whether there's injury or not. They might just choose to use them instead of somebody else, depending on what's happening, load management, etc. But they also have, I'm not sure what the exact number is, training partners that sit alongside them. So for me, I think, I appreciate going down to 10 enables us to pay our athletes more, to set us off on this journey of professionalisation, which is exciting in itself. Of course, we want to be professional, but it can't be too much too soon at the detriment of our sport, that we're now got a club that, we are one of the top clubs in the country decimated, which ultimately we are. So.
Yeah, I wanted to also just make clear to listeners as well, Next Gen don't play the super shot rule, do they?
No, Next Gen don't play the super shot rule, no, and they don't have the timeouts in there either.
Which is quietly quite remarkable if you are trying to replace a shooter and then you're throwing them into this super shot environment. And we've seen already on Saturday the sugar rush that was for everybody, like to potentially, given that this is supposed to be an under 23 league as well, these are mostly young players coming into that super shot. So I think that's important.
And you know what, the super shot isn't just about the shot, right? Like,
sure.
When it got announced and everyone's like, oh, the super shot, and it's Marmite, isn't it? Some people love it, some people hate it, but then you look at it and go, it's not. People go to me, well, you're all right, Greggy, you've got El Murray can shoot big, Anya can shoot big, Paige can shoot big, Lois can shoot big. Yeah, that's great. That's fine that my shooters can shoot big, but it's not just about being able to shoot big. Have you got the mental capacity to be able to recognise where you are in a game, to know when to take the twos, when to take the ones, how to actually get into those positions? Because it's not just about like, you look at we've done loads of PA on the super shot in Australia. How are those players most efficient at getting into those areas to be able to split a defence or shift a defence or, get in your hot spots? What does it look like? Defenders, how are your defenders defending it? Like what are your tactics? It's not just, oh, the shooters can shoot, it's great. How are your defenders defending it? What are your tactics around where you're trying to force the shooters? Your angles are completely different. So you're training your defenders up to be something that completely opposite to what we've tried to do for the 10 minutes prior in that quarter. So it's not just about the super shot and the shot and have you got shooters to do it. There's a whole big picture around it that the next gen athletes are not getting. And then they might have to come, we're in a situation now where we've got El Murray as one shooter and we're pulling next gen shooters into our group. I've never done next gen, I've never done, super shot before. So I'm now starting afresh with my next gen shooters, trying to get them to be where I need them to be, and we're still learning. We're still in that position where we're still learning because I've only had them in training properly for 3 weeks. So it's a little bit chaos.
It does feel that a league that is supposed to kind of contribute to the senior league, if you like, should be playing the same kind of rules, right? I think it's a little bit like in the FA Cup where 7 stadiums can use VAR but 1 doesn't. It kind of distorts the competition a little bit. So it's a challenge. Where do you stand on the super shot, just as a innovation in general, Karen? You've spoken a little bit about where it goes tactically, which I think we already kind of got a little look at. Teams are going to play it differently, but as a concept and as something that's been brought into the league, what are your thoughts?
I'm not 100% against it. When it first got brought into SSN, I was like, oh God, don't like this. This is awful. But I think because it was brought in again so late to their league, the first 2-3 years was absolute chaos. Well, people are figuring out how to actually play it and how to use it. And I think it's probably been the last couple of years in SSN that's actually made some games really, really exciting and good to watch. So I'm not against it, and I do think if we can get it right, then it could be a real good tick for our game. Absolutely. My biggest thing around it was, and I've openly spoken about it, was tender process. There was no talk about changing our game and what those innovations were going to be. So you're tendering for a team, not even really knowing what the league was going to look like. You're recruiting players, not really knowing what the league was, that this rule was going to be played. And people, I know there's been conversations around, well, would you have signed different shooters had you have known this beforehand? I might not have done. I probably wouldn't have done. But my argument around it is, I've now got shooters that I didn't get in until the 17th week commencing the 17th of February. And I've got 3 weeks to work with them on this new innovation to get right for the start of the season, which is no time at all when you're trying to build connections of normal netball, never mind super short netball. So I'm not against it. I think it could really work for our league and definitely make it exciting. I think we got a snapshot of what it could look like at the weekend, although I do think it was a little bit chaos. I know I said to my shooters, just because it's a 2-point shot doesn't mean every shot has to be a 2-point shot. We can be a little bit smart with this. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see how teams embrace it and what tactics they play around it. But I do think it can be good for our league, so it'll be interesting to see how that evolves.
I remember you said to me on Saturday, Karen, you weren't a big fan of the lights that were flicking.
Oh my God, the lights. I was like, if that was me, I would be literally, the lights went down, there were spotlights everywhere, and it was like, if I'm setting up to shoot at that point, wow, that is like sensory overload, right? You're trying to shoot a big shot with lights flashing and spotlights. Like, yeah, that wasn't it for me. Shout super shot over the mic and do whatever you want to do with music, but the lights, that's not great.
It even felt like, I was watching from home, it felt like the stadium was plunged into darkness at times. And it was like, it was like, not kind of, get it from a try it point of view, but I'd kind of be surprised if that sort of stuff carries on. It just didn't.
We won't be doing it at Thunder, Paul. I've said to our match day team, we are keeping the lights on.
There's a first unlocked exclusive, Chloe.
There you go.
No lights in Thunder. Karen, can I ask more generally about the tender process and the professionalisation from your experience? Because you also came out quite publicly came out with the fact somebody was like, oh, was a super shot around recruitment? And you came out and said no, which was, a piece of information people were desperate to know. So you really lifted the lid on that for us. But where did that come from? Was that a place of frustration?
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. Like, obviously at Thunder, I sit with my feet in two camps at Thunder. So I'm a director on the board. I'm the franchise director and head coach in my day job. So I'm very much involved in the running of the club from day to day, and was very much involved in the tender process. And to be honest, last year was pretty horrendous. Like, it was so hard to kind of be part of a bid that there was still aspects of that bid that nobody was really clear of what you were actually bidding for. There was things happening at different times that we had to be adaptable to along the way. Obviously, everyone's super excited to be part of that journey in that tender process and want to be part of NSL2, but it was a long and arduous task that for me came alongside trying to be a head coach at the same time, which made it really difficult. And then obviously the uncertainty around, are we going to have a team, which we had to wait and find out quite a few months for. So that uncertainty of, am I going to have a job in 3-4 months' time? It's as difficult as for anyone, really. So, it was a long process. Every aspect of the business was scrutinised, from finances to community to your governance to, your performance department. And we had to make sure that we put the best possible bid together. And it was tough. There was some hard conversations at times. There was emotional conversations at times. And, if somebody asked me if I wanted to go through a tender process again, absolutely not. I'm out. I'll go on holiday at that point. Thanks.
You'll be head coach, Karen, not franchise director.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like pick your team in it. I'm like, oh god. Yeah.
And one piece of this puzzle as well is the arena aspect. And I was wondering if you could maybe give us a bit of an insight into how that's sort of going for Thunder. You've always been one of the games that sells out. You have a great community at the Bellevue. I was looking at your schedule. You're also everyone's arena game, which I think is a nod to the kind of netball you put out and the challenge that you offer, but also that the fans you're going to bring as well. But how are things selling, given, where Saturday also was at in terms of nearly a full arena and lights and all of that jazz? What can the expectations be for the season ahead?
I think having 2 arena games in a year is always going to be a challenge for any team. We've been lucky enough to have an arena game for the last few years, and I think we've been averaging around 4.3, 4.5, for those ticket sales, which is pretty damn great. And I know targets around operating standards and KPIs are around hitting that kind of 3,500 to 5,000 seat at this point. Ticket sales have been slow, but I think notoriously netball fans are slow at buying tickets. Like, we have seen an uplift in the last week. We definitely have. And I think we're around just under 4,000 at the moment, ahead of Sunday. So we are going to be doing a big push over the next few days to try and obviously get more people through the door. But arena games are expensive. Like, just to open the doors, you're talking, and I mean, I don't even really see the final figures, but just to open doors, you're talking around 60 grand just to open the doors. And then you've got to lay your courts, have your lightings, all your match day experience stuff, pay your staff, so it's you 100 grand minimum for an arena game that you've got to sell tickets to make back. And I think that's a really, really tough ask for teams. And for me, looking at this year, teams having 2 arena games this year with the idea of going to 3 arena games next year, I think going to 3 potentially is a step too far. I think we need to be selling out our home venues week in, week out, and creating the demand for people, because netballers are, and I can only speak for the Northwest, right, and Thunder fans, but notoriously buy tickets late. And we're very, very lucky that we've got a franchise, that we've got a great venue in Bellevue. We average around 1,700 people into our venue, but we're not selling out every game. And it has to become a point where we're selling out every game and there is a demand for tickets. So they see those arena games as, we know we're going to get tickets at the arena, so let's get the tickets. We need to get Bellevue, and the fans are buying early. So when we release the tickets in October, we can already say we've sold out, but we're not at that point yet. So we have to really look at, well, what is the overall plan, and are we willing to pivot, pause, whatever that looks like, to generate that need and demand for tickets, and appreciate where we're at and the cost that falls on the clubs in hosting these kind of games. Are arena games brilliant? Absolutely. Like, they are the best experience. The players love them, I love them, the crowds love them. And of course we want every game to be in an arena and be a show. But we've got to create that demand, and I don't think we've created that demand yet. So, we've got to get to a point where, how do we get more bums on seats and sell these tickets? And is the arena picture the right way to go? I'm not sure it's the right way to go on every single game. I know that's where NSL2 want to get to, but I know we did a fan survey at the end of last year. We actually got a really good response. I think we got something like 850 people respond to a survey, which in itself is a big response. Yeah. And a lot of our fans, they don't want arena games. They love the intimacy of Bellevue and the match day experience that Bellevue brings. So I think we've got to almost listen to what the fans want as well, and give them what they want. And I'm not saying don't play any games in arenas, because, as I've just said, like, they're brilliant. I love them. They're great. They're the best day out. But we've just got to be maybe prepared to pause and pivot where we can definitely look to improve our sport. But it's definitely a great vision from NSL2. We just have to make sure we get it right.
I think that's a really great point on two fronts. I think to kind of maybe inform people who don't know that the level of cost that sometimes can go with a production or an event is something that I think when I worked at Sky, I would often kind of get frustrated that people would say, "I'll just put it on the telly." It's not actually that straightforward all of the time. But I think the second point you make, Karen, is a really, really good one. It's at what point in this process, and obviously there was the kind of at the start, this 10-year vision, that doesn't necessarily mean everything has to run to a tight plan. I think learning as the league and the teams go is going to be super important. And that, I don't know, getting bums on seats, Chloe and I called it, has been a challenge for netball for years and years and years. So kind of how do you see at some point what is a super engaged grassroots level of netball? And we've seen in terms of streaming content and watching it on demand as opposed to live. How does the sport, this is a big question, turn that into bums on seats with a little bit more regularity so that it can grow and maybe in 5-6 years' time playing in sort of 7 arena games in a home season?
Yeah, that's the bums on seat piece is definitely something I know NSL2 are looking at. I know every single club is looking at, because we know the amount of people who play netball is massive. There are so many people playing netball, but that doesn't equate to ticket sales. It just doesn't. So I know like England Netball and the clubs are working on working as one piece, and how we can be connected to get out there into the communities to raise that profile. But you actually speak to a lot of people who play in local leagues, simple leagues, young professional leagues. They don't even know what Thunder is, you know. And like we're the biggest club in the Northwest, and if not one of the biggest ones in the country. So people don't know what Thunder is. Then I'm like, God, where do we even start? You know, and do we have the bandwidth of people to be able to get out there and influence? Like at Thunder, we haven't got the bandwidth of people. Like I'm constantly, you know, as franchise director, I'm like, how can we get out into the community more? What does our outreach look like? How can we get into these unaffiliated leagues? And that's kind of like a bad word, unaffiliated, but the majority of our netball players probably are unaffiliated netballers. So how do we actually get out and get a grasp on these people so they understand actually what we're actually doing? And having the bandwidth and the staff to be able to do that is critical. We're in a massive chicken and egg situation. You know, you employ staff to go out there and do it, but can we afford to pay those staff? Because we haven't got the bums on seats yet. So I know that's a huge piece that NSL2 and the teams are definitely working on, and definitely something that needs to improve. And I think also when you look at that is the amount of netball that is being played across the country. And again, I can only speak for the Northwest in exactly what is happening. You've got leagues happening on Saturdays, you've got leagues happening on Sundays, and they can't come to watch you because there's a clash. Yeah. And I mean, you might know better than me, Paul. I don't know how junior football works. You know, a lot of the leagues finish by 1 o'clock, so that means dads and lads can get a season ticket and go and watch football. But that concept of the you know, and I don't want to be sexist or anything like that, but you know, it's the old age of if a man has a season ticket for football with his son, they are going to every game to watch that game. The mum is at home doing the dinners for the husband, doing the washing, and I'm not being sexist, but the place in the home for the women is very different than the place in the home for men. Not in every case, but in a lot of cases. So the mums having season tickets and taking the girls and the boys to watch netball is nowhere near as many as the men doing it with the lads. So I think there has to be a shift in what our social scene is in netball as well.
It's tough, and you two will obviously be able to speak to this far more than me, but we learnt a lot at Sky in terms of kind of consumption habits, in terms of kind of, you know, the platform that we got most engagement on was Instagram, way more than Twitter, YouTube, because there was an ability to be able to watch a stream on demand as opposed to live. Like the consumption habits between male and females when it comes to sport is very, very different. And netball, as we've often discussed, is pretty uniquely placed to try and take advantage of it. But it's an incredibly difficult thing to do. I don't envy anyone kind of trying to kind of uncover that information and turn what is my daughter plays, and sometimes she might play as many as 3 or 4 games on a weekend of netball. Like how do you find the time to then go and watch a game in amongst all of that as well? So it doesn't have an answer at the moment.
No, and you look at your demographic of who's coming to watch matches, and the majority of them are mums and their kids. So it's definitely getting there, and it's great. It's just how do we just keep pushing on those numbers? And I think you look at your return customers. We're doing a massive piece with a company called Fanfare, and Gemma's doing a great job with us of the trends of how many return ticket buyers, what does it look like, you know. And it's very different, you know. You get your season ticket holders, and then you get your mums and your kids. But how many times a year do they come? And they don't come to every game. They might only come 1 or twice over the year because daughter's playing or son's playing their sports, and they can't come. So there's definitely that social aspect. But I also know, you know, we're a part of a women's sport network in Manchester. So I know Ben, who works in our marketing team, and Gemma from Fanfare have been working closely with Lancashire Cricket women's team and the 100, and obviously the originals there, Salford women, City women, United women, and a lot of what we're doing, they're envious of what we're doing because we're getting a lot of bums on seats, and we're actually attracting the audiences that they're trying to get at their sport. So they're looking to us going, well, how are you doing it? And it's like, well, we're doing this, and this, but we need more because, like, you know, we're constantly demanding. So even though we're looking at ourselves going, we need more, we know we're already doing as good a job, if not better, than women's football in Manchester, than rugby in Manchester, than cricket in Manchester. They're wanting to tap into our demographic, which for me is exciting because we're doing something right, that's for sure. Whether it's because it's an indoor sport, then I don't know, but we're definitely doing something right. We're definitely on the right track. It's just how we grow that.
Yeah.
I think that indoor sport piece is funny because it's almost definitely a big advantage and absolutely something netball needs to be leaning into. But Karen, look, we've got your precious time, so I'd love to like shift us on to last year's final. Oof.
Really, you want to go there?
Let's go back there, Karen, because that was a very tough day for you guys, and I don't know if you might raise your eyebrows at me calling it this, but it looked like things fell apart for you, and you were very unfortunate. I think Nat Metcalf was unwell, Ella Bowen went down injured, and Lightning came out like we haven't seen all season. Like they were just ready for that, almost like ready for that one game. Talk us through your memories of that day and maybe how it's pushed you on since.
I've pushed it to the back of my mind, to be honest, Chloe. It's like one I definitely want to forget. I think it was a bad day at the office and we didn't turn up. You know, we were not Manchester Thunder on court that day, and that for me was the biggest disappointment, that we didn't show that fight. And I look at the squad that we put out that day versus the squad that Loughborough put out that day, and the amount of experience, finals experience they had in that group compared to what we have in our group or had in that group was immense. You know, like we had players that had never played in a final before, that nerves were, you know, just probably sky high at that moment, and we just couldn't ever get to grips with it. You know, they come out and court, they hit us hard, they took a great lead, and we adjusted it, we pulled it back, and then they came at us again, and we just could never get our hands around it to get a grip of what was out there. And as you say, we were managing. Nat had illness at the back end of the season, which obviously impacts minutes and loading and what that looks like. So and other aspects obviously, but yeah, it's one that you push back to the back of your mind. But for me, you've got Amy Carter playing in a first final, you've got Lois Pearson playing in a first final, you've got Elma Ray and Paige playing in their first finals, and you know, Shadeen, and you look at it and you go, do you know what, guys, you're going to learn from this, and this is going to be the biggest lesson you're ever going to have, and you're never going to want to feel this way again, like ever. I've not ever been to a final and lost, so that for me was tough. Every final we've got to, we've won. Even, we've been beaten semi-finals, obviously, but every final we've been to, we'd won. So that was a tough day for me as well, and a tough day for me to kind of reflect on, would I do things differently, and would I give different messages to people, and was our approach to preparation different than it had been before, and what that looked like. So in the off season, very much take control of players' feedback, staff feedback, looking at what we would do different and how we would approach moving forwards. And just that experience piece for me, hopefully for those players that are still with us this year, will stand us in good stead to push us where we need to be at the business end of the season, and really know what it feels like to be on the big stage and step up when the pressure's on. So a lot to learn from it, that's for sure. It was definitely a big knife in the heart. But yeah, I'm over it. Just yeah, we're playing Loughborough again on Sunday, right? So yeah, I'm over it. I'm ready to go. But yeah, we didn't turn up. Bad day at the office, and definitely a lot to learn from it. And experience finals for some of those players will definitely stand them in good stead moving forward.
And can you, talk us through a couple of the recruitments that you've made off the back of that learning? Because I think Nicola Smith is a really curious one for me, because you've taken her from the team that won, and that was in her debut season. So how did you bring her across? Why did you want to bring her across? And obviously she's been injured, but you're working her hard. We've seen a video as well of her running around too. So I think also in the final she was brilliant too, right? I think 6 penalties. Like, her game is clean. So tell me a bit about that decision.
Yeah, I mean, Nicola was immense for Loughborough Lightning last year. I think she started off obviously finding her feet in NSL. She was quite penalty heavy at the start of the season, but really cleaned up her game towards the end, and actually was so effective in what she was doing. As people know at Thunder, I like familiarity. I like when I recruit, I like to recruit players that I know will fit our team culture. That for me is a big thing. So it's not just about ability, it's about culture and stability. So you're not starting afresh every year. It's really important that you got players that know how you want to play, what the Thunder way is, how do you integrate new players into that. And when we went down to a squad of 10, the recruitment piece was huge. I had a big spreadsheet with every player across the league, and I'd had every position ranked, and comments where we needed, key ones that we were looking at, where, how do you think we'll fit? And it would have been very, very easy for me last year to stick with 10 out of our 12 players from that squad. It would have been very easy for me to do that, and they were a great bunch of girls. But we could have ended up with the same result this year, right? If definition of madness is a quote out there, isn't it? If you keep doing the same thing, you expect the same results. So for me, I really needed to look at our shooting end was young and fresh last year. It offered us a lot of variety, and when we could actually inject different players and when and why against different opposition. And for me, there's still so much more growth in that unit. So for us to stick with that attacking unit was key, because it's young, fresh. Let's go with it. There's so much more development. The defence end had been samey for 2 years, and we were getting the same results. So if we want to change the result, we've got to change something, right? So for me, I'm like, if we're going to make a change in that defence end, what does it need to look like? Nick's got height, she's got pace, she's got reach, she reads the game really well, and she can offer you 2 positions solidly. So when you're playing off a squad of 10, you need the adaptability across your units. And if we were to freshen up the defence end, I needed a player that could come in and I know could make impact, and that I knew both on and off the court they were able to do that. And for me, Nicola was ranked our number 1 in that position. So it would have been daft of me to not put that call into her agent and say, we're interested, is she interested? And I know it was probably a difficult decision for her to make, to leave Loughborough having just won a title. But I obviously put in a good case, because she was hoping to come to us, and I know she's a great girl. She's great in and around our environment. She's quite funny, quite dry, a bit cheeky, which I like. But she's definitely been putting in the hard work while she's been recovering from a broken wrist. So it wasn't an easy decision to make, but in terms of who we needed to slot into that, that was the easiest decision because she was ranked our number one off the back of the league last year.
That's a really insightful way to kind of know about how kind of some of that recruitment played out. You touched a little bit there, Karen, on it. You guys are one of the teams who I said in our kind of preview episode, you have a real identity about what you are. How, it sounds silly because if you know anything about any kind of sport, that culture that a team can create and that identity and personality that a team are able to take on, how hard has that been to create? Because I actually think it probably works to your advantage when you have to give sort of younger pathway or next gen players a chance. They know what they're stepping into. So how does that whole kind of culture and environment and personality as well come through?
Yeah, I think it is important, and I've always kind of had the ethos like if you were to ask somebody to kind of talk about me and what I can bring, I'll always bring a smile, hopefully, you know. But the girls know they can be my friend, but they know when the line is drawn that I mean business, and ultimately they know they've got to go on the work and do the court, go on the court and do the work. And I think that ethos, having worked in a pathway for a long period of time, like I was Northwest Pathway coach for England netball for 8.5 years. So I heavily worked in our pathways before I stepped up to head coach as Manchester Thunder. So being able to develop that culture and that ethos and be so connected to the franchise, because obviously I played and was assistant coach at the same time, to have that connection across the pathway. And when the pathway is then embedded into the Super League, we were really able to kind of bring that hard work, you know, little bit of fun ethos into what's expected at Thunder. We've got high expectations. You turn up in the right kit, you turn up on time, and that's your identity. Someone looks at you, they know you're a Manchester Thunder player. You're proud to be a Manchester Thunder player. You don't turn up in the wrong kit. You don't turn up late. And that's not me. I'm not going to go out and bollock people for doing that, but you hold yourself accountable for that. And that then creates a real belonging and a culture piece of, we're proud to be a part of this club, and if we want to play, we're going to go out there and fight for that badge and fight for each other, and we can have a little bit of fun along the way, you know. And I think that for me, and creating that piece, and it's hard to kind of pinpoint exactly what it is, right? But it's the expectations of, no, that's not Manchester Thunder, that's not okay. And it's when you bring people in, it's them catching on pretty quick that it might be a little bit different to where you've been before. The expectations are high, and we expect you to come in and be a part of our club and work hard. Someone asks you, how do Manchester Thunder play? We play with passion. We're comfortable on the ball. We're comfortable in possession. You know, we can play that hard man-on-man game. We can play that 3-over on a centre-pass defence. We can play our ball speed and swings around the circle edge. We've got our identity, our basic principles on the court that are thread throughout our whole pathway. And I think that's what was really important for me, was the fact I've worked in pathways so long. I know how important it is to embed it from the youngest age to the oldest age. And, you know, that passion and sense of belonging to the club, I think, is really key.
You kind of preempted me a little bit, Karen, because I have your resume sat in front of me. I had a look because you, for people that maybe don't know, you actually are Manchester Thunder #1. You are the kind of
the OG.
The OG, yeah, KG OG. You know, you've been in this league 24 years, but your influence is actually immense. And I think another nice little nugget that I found is that actually Thunder, given how long you've been in the league, you've only capped 79 players, because you've got players that come back to you. When they've left, they've come back. And I think that says a lot without saying anything about the kind of culture that you've kind of just alluded to there. But I wanted to know a little bit more about you as a coach. This was something Paul and I are a bit fascinated by, being, quote, super netball nerds. But do you have any kind of philosophies or mantras that that speak to you? And here's a second one. Are you more of a tactician or a technical master?
I think when we talk about coaching philosophy, it's hard really to put into words, but I always think as a coach, every day is a school day, and you have to be prepared to learn something new every day. And I am not. I will always look at my opposition and have a look at how the other coaches are working. I'll look at the other leagues across the world and how that's working. I'll pick people's brains, and sometimes I'll sit back quietly and I'll just observe and soak stuff in. So for me, it's every day is a school day. You know, I love watching sporting documentaries. You know, what's going on in other sports. How, you know, I loved the Man City one that's, you know, on, I think it's on Netflix, when they won the treble a couple of years ago. I loved seeing how Pep was on the training pitch with his players and how he integrated with that. And for me, every day is a school day, and you can never afford to sit back, because when you sit back, it's game over. So I think that for me, around my philosophy is, as a coach, is key. You're going to have to ask me again.
Yeah, tactician or technical master.
Yeah. A bit of both. I think players that know players from Manchester and the Northwest know that technically we've got very good technical sound players. And for me, you know, you can look at it, and the way coaching awards and everything work, fully open to game sense, game awareness, let them try, let them play. Absolutely. But if you can't pass the ball from A to B, we've got a problem. So, you know, that technical aspect for me is key. And yes, I was drilled as a kid. Yeah, you know, like, but I look at it and I go, my skills barely let me down. So I would like to think I'm pretty good with the technical side and getting players that skill set that they need to be able to execute the tactics that you want to do. So, you know, you talk about game plans, and your opposition each week. You're going to come up against opposition every week, but you can't change your game plan every week, because your players are going to be so bloody confused. They're going to be like, well, we did this last week when they did that, and now you're asking us to do this, and you've only got 2 or 3 training sessions to actually get it right. So your principles as a team have to remain true to what you're trying to achieve, but your tactics may just tweak each week. So you're looking at hotspots of, you know, where your opposition like to land the centre pass. What does their first phase, second phase look like? How do we stop that? So your principles of, are we doing a 2-on-1? Are we doing a 3-over? Are we doing hard 1-on-1? What does that look like dependent on your opposition? So your basics are still there, but you might just tweak it slightly. You know, in attack, you're coming up against an opposition that, you know, you've got a Fumi, for instance. How do you combat a Fumi within your principles and game plan? So I would look at a centre pass, for instance, of how I can play against Fumi's strengths, and that's difficult because she's a world-class, brilliant player. So your game plans and your tactics may just tweak slightly dependent on your opposition. You can't go all out every week, but you're going to have slight. So I would say I'm probably 50-50, but you have to be able to pass from A to B, right? Your technical skills got to be there.
Pass the ball.
Yeah.
One thing I noticed at the weekend, you had obviously Laura and Nat on the bench with you.
That's dangerous, by the way, having 2 pregnant ladies next year. I'm like, whoa.
I was going to say this to start with. How involved are they going to be over the course of the rest of this season, given they have far more pressing concerns, as important as Thunder is? But also, how important to you to be able to kind of, as much as you've sort of spoken about pathways, but actually sort of give some of the sort of players who are now coming to the end of their careers as well, not writing any of them off, but like giving them that exposure to the coaching environment too.
It's super important, and as you say, Nat and Laura are actually due within 2 weeks of each other, so there's definitely going to be a period of time where they're not around. So obviously really excited to have 2 little girls in our, and I actually said to them, can we give them some like growth, you know, let's get them big and strong quick. How do we make that happen? But yeah, for me, I look at it and I think at Manchester Thunder, I don't just want it to be about the players and the performance. It's about a coaching pathway. I look at how I've got to where I've got to today and worked a long time in the pathway for England netball. I assisted Tracy for 2-3 years. I assisted Dan, and then I stepped up into the head coach role. There's got to be a pathway, and I think especially now in NSL2, the whole coaching as a thing in our country has to improve. You look at, have we got coaches ready to step into the Super League as head coaches? You don't, and no disrespect to the players that have done it, but how hard for like Tamsin, Joe Tripp, Mickey, must it have been to be like a player coach? Like, we shouldn't be in a position where players are player coaches, like, or jumping straight from being a player into being a head coach in their first year. Like, that is massive, and the education isn't there for that. Like, you do your coaching badges. No one teaches you how to manage a sports medicine team or how to do your PA. You're learning that. It's like that analogy of your swan. You're up here and you're looking nice, but you're absolutely going 10 to the dozen under the water, because you're learning. You're learning on the ropes. And for me, I'm really passionate about developing the coaches in our environment. So I look at you look at Laura, and Laura is a absolutely unbelievable coach, by the way. She is great. She is so diligent. She is so demanding of the players, which is great, holds them accountable. She wants to learn the trade. She wants to be a Super League head coach, but she wants to learn the trade. And so for me, I'll do what I can to support Laura in that space, because I want her, when she's ready to step into that head coach, to be ready for it and not be, obviously you're always going to be learning, but you're not that swan. And I don't want to be a head coach forever. I've done it for, this year's my 9th season as a head coach, and what does my future hold? I don't know, but there's going to come a point where I want to step away from it. And I need to know that somebody at Thunder is ready to step in. And I'm really proud that, you look at what we've achieved, and I've done some work at England. You look at Lauren Palmer, who's just gone over to Leeds Rhinos. She was in our pathway for a long time. She worked under me a couple of years ago, did some assistant coaching with us on the Super League bench. For her to get the opportunities at England and now at Leeds Rhinos, I'm like, Thunder have played a part in her development. So I'm really proud of that. And I want to be able to do more for more coaches. So it's not just about the players on the court, it's about how we can transition them. If they want to be a Super League coach, how can we help them transition? Because the education isn't there at the minute, so what can I do to help them?
And you sort of mentioned there that Thunder is involved in Lauren's journey, but I also wanted to quickly talk about how, if you look at the England 2024-25 Roses and future Roses, it is full of people that have played at Thunder, were made at Thunder, or have been at Thunder. So 6 future Roses, and Allison, Cardwell, Carter, Housby, Metcalf, Neal, Pearson, Reed, Scholes. What is that like for you as a point of pride, seeing Thunder on the England team, and at a time when England are doing better?
I mean, I'm super proud. I think if you can have had some kind of influence on a player's career, I think it's job done as a coach. So, you can look at all these players that have come through our pathway, that have been at Thunder at Super League, have maybe gone away and come back, or stayed away, but that real kind of base of their development. You look at Berry, you look at Liss, and those youngsters that are just breaking into the Roses now. They were at Thunder from being 11, 12 years old to being 18, 19 years old. So whilst they're not with us now, I still watch with pride as to what they're actually putting out on the international career. And I just think the more players I can help to influence and push through, the better. And I will always have my players' backs. And Jess I probably do Jess's head in, because I'm literally going, you need to look at this play, you need to look at that play. I'm banging on the door for a couple of years about Lois. You need to look at Lois. You need to look at Lois. It is, and I'll always back what I've been a part of development wise. And super proud when you look, as you say, you look across the league, you look across the Roses and Futures, and there is that Thunder influence everywhere. And that's definitely, hopefully, a legacy of our club that we want to continue.
Karen, we could probably carry on talking forever and ever and ever, because there's so much to get stuck
Give
into.
away too many secrets if we talk forever and ever and ever.
But we know you're really busy, so just a couple to finish off with. I was going to ask you, and we'll probably ask everyone of this, and people will get sick of it over the next year, but having sort of been in that great picture that did the rounds earlier this week of kind of frilly dresses and kind of grainy pictures, like having seen where netball has got to now, how do you see this next critical journey, professionalisation, all the buzzwords that are being thrown around? Where would you like to see, I don't know, maybe in 3 or 4 years' time, not the full 10 years away, because your pivot point, I think, was a really good one. Where do you see us being in 3 or 4 years' time?
I'd love to see us in 3 or 4 years' time selling out our venues, and I'm not saying that they're all arenas, because we're not going to be there in 3 or 4 years' time. Can we sell out our week in, week out venues? I would love at Thunder to have a demand that people are, you know, almost transferring tickets to people because they can't come, so they're going to transfer them to somebody else, and there's a demand for those tickets. You know, I think we've got about 200 season ticket holders at the minute. Can we increase that to 500 in the next 3-4 years? What does that look like? And can we fill our stadiums week in, week out, create that demand, create that excitement? Can we get all of our games on Sky, not just Sky Sports YouTube? What does that look like? And can the production behind that be amazing? Can the stats that are being kept behind that be bang on? Amazing that if we want to go online and find out stats, we can find them and they're accurate. You know, like all these things that we're not quite there with yet. By year 3, 4, I'm like, if we can get there by year 3 and 4, that's great. So bums on seats, crowds, reliable stats, and every match on actual TV, not just like YouTube or a streaming. Then that for me would be a brilliant result of where we're at. And NSL2 is an exciting journey, and I really hope we are successful with it, because I love nothing more. We've got to get it right.
Can I go one last question, Karen? I spoke on our first podcast about how the Super Shot might serve up some Australian scouts and agents, some of our super talent, but coaching as well. Do you have ambitions, dreams, hopes of going to SSN or any other big jobs that might be out there?
Right at the end. There you go. Deal with that. Right at the end.
I would never say never. But I love Manchester. I love where I'm at. Obviously, my roots are here. My family's here. I would never say never. Would I say in the next year or two? Probably not. No. But definitely not something I'd turn my nose up if I was given an opportunity. I would love to go out there and be in an environment for 4 to 6 weeks-ish. Something, a short-term period where I could go in and get my teeth around something, really see how something operated, and just kind of use that as a learning opportunity and development opportunity. And if I can give any nuggets while I'm out there too, great. As I say never, but not right now.
Perfect. Thank you for that.
Listen, Karen, thank you for your time. We really, really appreciate it. I'm sure we'll talk to you plenty more over the course of the season, but the very best of luck to you.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.